Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more Automation, the Car Company Tycoon game, continuing on with the campaign roleplay of the Edison Car Company in 1991. Now, considering we have this new update, I thought I would do things a little bit differently. Normally, I would start building a car from the beginning, the car model from the beginning, and show you the process all the way through. Well, I thought to save time and to go over some of the things that have been added into the game now, I would build the cars ahead of time, kind of work everything out, and then show you the finished product. So let's go ahead and get into the model here. And the model we're going to be looking at is the Edison Luna for 1991, which is our small economy car for our lineup. So the first of the trims we're going to look at is the manual transmission version. Now, starting at the beginning, there are a couple compromises I had to make with this model. First off, with the car body choice. You do get a penalty for choosing older car bodies, and unfortunately, with the kind of look that I wanted to go for, which honestly would have been a four-door sedan, because that's, even in 1991 would have been more the norm, even for a small economy car. But unfortunately, there wasn't any car body that fit that description of a four-door sedan and was the right size, so I had to end up going with a five-door hatchback, and you're going to have to kind of use your imagination. I tried to style it a little bit so that it looked a little tiny bit like a four-door sedan, but as best as I could. And the other compromise I had to make, and we'll go ahead and see this in a second, but let's go ahead and look at the chassis here. So I chose a monocoque chassis with corrosion-resistant steel as its material. We have a front transverse engine mounting. And that is the other compromise, is I could only get the 1.6-liter engine to fit. I intended to have two engines for this car model, a 1.6-liter engine and a 2.2-liter engine. The 2.2-liter engine wouldn't fit. And I tried a couple other bodies that are, this late 80s, early 90s style bodies, and none of them would fit a 2.2-liter engine in a front transverse mount. And I've already discussed this before. The way that they model in transverse gearboxes is just not right, and as a result, you have a lot of wasted space in the hood here. You see how much of a space is wasted over here, but this 1.6-liter engine barely fits in. It's, practically scraping against the body panel in here because of the way that they model in the gearbox. So there's a lot of wasted space, and oftentimes it's hard to get engines that would fit normally in this style car to fit. And it just one of those things. So I had to make a compromise and only go with the 1.6-liter engine. As far as the suspension goes, I have a McPherson strut in the front and a torsion beam in the rear. The panel material is polymer, which is going to do a number of things for us. First off, it's going to keep the production units low and the weight low, much more than steel would. There's not really a loss as far as the tooling cost or the material cost. Where we lose out, though, is safety in a big way. We actually gain out in corrosion as well, which makes sense. Polymer doesn't really rust. And you also lose out in prestige because polymer is just another way of saying plastic, is really, people think of, especially in this time period, would think more of a toy car when they're thinking plastic than a real one. So those are the things that we lose out on, but we gain a big way in weight, as I said, and we'll see that here when we look at the weights. Now, I already kind of showed the styling, but I'm just going to go ahead and go around the car real slow here. So I went with the yellow car, the yellow paint, because that has been the traditional color of the Luna. And we've done variations of shades, but it's always been a yellow car. Okay, moving along. As I discussed, this is a transverse front-wheel drive setup. And we can go straight into the engine just so that we can get a very quick reminder of what kind of power we can expect from this thing. So it produces 77.4 horsepower and 82.7 foot-pounds of torque. This was supposed to be the more economical engine of the two engines we were supposed to put in there, and then the 2.2 liter engine would have been an optional, higher power version. Unfortunately, this is the only engine that will fit, so we have to go with it. All right, popping into the trim here, let's go ahead and go to the gearbox. So the gearbox is set up with a 5-speed manual gearbox. This is the manual version. I also have an automatic version. The 5th gear is our economy gear, going beyond our estimated top speed for better fuel economy, getting close to 30 miles per gallon. Pretty good. Our 0 to 62 time is 11 seconds, which is a little bit pokey, but it's not, for a 1.6 liter engine, it's not horrific. We were able to get rid of the wheel spin. I kind of purposely designed it that way. Obviously, if I allowed for a little bit of wheel spin, I might have gotten the 0 to 62 time a little bit quicker, but with the type of engine we have and the type of car it is, I think it's better to have no wheel spin. So I set up the top speed, as I said, for the economy, and the spacing was just to get rid of what little wheel spin there was, which wasn't a whole lot. Okay, moving along. We have medium compound road for the tire choice, and I went with 15-inch rims, although you could probably make an argument for 14-inch rims, and honestly, I probably could have gotten away with that when I show you the brakes, but we also have a wheel diameter a little bit below the default, and tire widths are 175s, both front and rear, and we have a little bit of rim offset as well. Now, as I was discussing, well, we would have gotten a little bit of brake fade if we had gone down to rim size, because the rim size dictates how big your brakes can be. But where it is, as far as the brakes are concerned, we have bigger brakes in the front with a solid single piston, solid disc single piston in the front. Now, traditionally, I have, with my company, done 2-piston brakes. The idea being that they're fixed brakes versus, like a slide caliper or something like that. Well, now that it's into the 90s, we're starting to make a little bit of compromises for affordability because, going up to the 2-piston style, you're going to not only add weight, but also expense by pretty decent margin. So to save money, we are just doing the slide calipers, single piston style brake setup. And again, to save money, we are doing drums in the rear. But as I said, we don't have any brake fade. I was able to go with smaller brakes than what would be the maximum for the rim diameter. So that's good. As far as the aerodynamics, we went with a fully clad under tray. It gives us, the best, as far as economy, you don't have as much drag and everything going on. Got rid of the wing angle, and we have cooling airflow. Just my usual, what I aim for is about 10 above what the required cooling is. As far as seats, I went with 5 to try and make this a little bit more practical and a little bit more family-oriented. As that's kind of the Luna has always been a little bit leaning towards that. I mean, I know it's a small car, but it's always been kind of family-leaning in the way it's designed. Interior-wise, we're not doing anything fancy, just a standard interior and standard entertainment. Power steering has always been a feature of the Luna. I toyed with the idea of adding ABS or any of these other things, but again, to keep costs low, I'm not going to opt for that. But we do have standard safety as well. Like, one thing I thought about doing was doing a trim that was a quote-unquote safety trim, and selecting like ABS and traction control and making it advanced safety, but then I ended up talking myself out of it. But that could be an option for the company. Now, as far as the suspension goes, again, we're going for the cheaper setup here, so standard springs, twin tube dampers, and passive is our only choice with that setup for the sway bar. And then I went, again, as I usually do, with the normal preset and just a little bit of tweaks, stiffening the suspension where needed, and which is usually what you have to do to get rid of bottom out, and also maybe changing the ride height a little bit. All that being said, the numbers that we end up with is drivability of 47.4, sportiness of 17.4, comfort of 23.5, prestige at 11.6, which is kind of our low point, but this is not really meant to be a prestigious car. and safety at 34.2. Total cost comes in at a little over 6,000, and we have some other numbers, practicality and all that along the way. But the weight was one of the things I wanted to talk about. That's pretty lightweight for the type of car it is, and we get that from the polymer body panel. So, all right. That being said, I'm not familiar with this design. Okay. Not really familiar with this tab and all that it has to say, but I guess it's telling us about, the engine power and things like that. All right, that's fine. I want to go over detailed stats before, and I'm only going to focus on the main big ones. Their drivability, sportiness, comfort, prestige, and safety. I know they have more tabs now, including off-road, which was something that I was hoping they were going to do eventually, and as well as utility, which is another thing that I was hoping they'd do it eventually, because not knowing where the utility numbers were coming from was kind of, in my opinion, a little bit confusing, and practicality, I think, is a new stat to look at. So anyway, going across the board, I might look at practicality. That might be something I look at from now on. But in any case, drivability. And as before, I'm just going to be on a tab for a few seconds. So if you want to look at the numbers in detail, just go ahead and pause the screen. Sportiness, comfort, prestige, safety, and practicality. And I'm actually going to look at this because this is one of the tabs I haven't yet looked at. So passenger space, cargo volume, footprint, width, seat count, doors, load capacity, and driver height. I find it interesting that doors we got a penalty on, considering that this is a 5-door hatchback. I wonder, if you had a 3-door hatchback, if you would get a bigger penalty here. I wonder how they calculate that. And also passenger space, because I put in 5, I could even just demonstrate this right now. I'm going to assume this. Because I put in 5 seats, the passenger space actually goes down. So if we go to 4 seats, I'm curious to see how that bonus changes. I'm going to change it back, but I just want to see how it affects it. So it looks like passenger space is the same, but we get a penalty for seat count. I kind of assumed that passenger space would go down because you're having to, put more people in the space, but I guess not. So looks like more seats is always better. It's actually not what I expected. Unfortunately, it's not giving me the difference here, so I don't actually know if it's going up or down by like marginal amounts. But yeah, it looks like the passenger space is exactly the same. I don't actually see much of a difference other than the seat count. So that's actually surprising, not what I would have thought. You would think that passenger space would go down as you cram in more seats, but I guess not. Any case, let's go ahead and go into the test track real quick. So the top speed is 111 miles an hour, 0.3. And the acceleration we already saw is 0 to 62 in 11 seconds. Let's go ahead and get a track time real quick. Okay, and our track time comes in at 1 minute 46.46, which honestly is not bad. I mean, that's pretty good. I've seen worse from more powerful cars, so that's pretty decent. And I always look for something below 1 minute 50, and that's a pretty good margin below 1 minute 50. But we're starting to get into the 90s, and it's getting easier and easier to achieve that. But still, I'm pretty proud of that time. Now let's look at our last tab, and that's the markets tab. Now, I already kind of changed the price of the car here. Gave it a 5% markup, as I thought that was kind of a reasonable markup. We could go with more of a markup than that, maybe even up to 10%. But I think a 5% markup is a decent markup. But in any case, that makes the final price of the car $11,445, which I think is pretty reasonable for the time period. We could have done a number of things to make that price lower, but still, I think that's in the ballpark. As far as our markets, the main big 3 markets we have are commuter, family, and family sport, which I honestly, that makes sense. You could maybe make an argument for more of a city car, but it's probably slightly too big for that. But I'm pretty happy with this because I think these 3 categories are exactly what we're looking for. We might achieve these categories a little bit better once we get into the star, but that might actually go into yet another category. So you have, family premium. Star might actually get into that a little bit. But, I guess there's just city premium and city budget. Yeah, you might have assumed that it would be in city budget, but I think our car is a little bit, this is, I think, for even cheaper cars than what we're going for. So I think the commuter, family, and family sport is perfect. Now, as far as which of these that we meet the best, it looks like family sport, at least with our manual transmission version, is the one that we meet the most, and then it kind of goes down from there, family and then commuter. So I would think that this would probably, what we would actually be aiming for is more maybe the commuter family market, these 2 markets, but to actually have more people desiring or more competitiveness in the family sport is not exactly what we're going for, but it's, it's a pleasant surprise. And then we have the affordability for these different segments. And this might be one of the reasons why we're dropping a bit in some of these categories is that markup. So 73% of the people in this market can afford this, 71% in this market, and 83.6% in this market. Now, I don't know. Yeah, it does look like. Okay, so for the city budget, yeah, exactly what I thought. Our car's a little bit too expensive for this segment. As you can see, only 20% of the people can afford a city budget. So it's kind of interesting. So, okay, this is another thing. City economy, I think, was another category that you might have thought that this would fall into. And we don't, we meet it decently. It's still green. So city and city economy might have been where we're thinking this car would have fallen, and it instead fell into the family category. So, yeah, these 2, they do all right. And as far as affordability, they do all right as well. But again, a little bit maybe too expensive for this market. So any case, that is our manual transmission trim. So let's go ahead and jump into our automatic transmission trim. And I think we'll see that it will fit those the family market a little bit better as we're getting a lot more of drivability and what have you. And I don't know, I didn't really go over it, but the numbers that were contributing to the different market segments, a lot of that was drivability. So I think we're going to see a difference in the way the markets are. But let's go ahead and look at what the trim is all about. So we have an automatic 4-speed transmission. The gearbox is set up a little bit differently. That 4th gear isn't going entirely past the top speed, but a little bit beyond it. And as a result, our fuel economy isn't quite as good as it was with our manual transmission. It drops off a bit. And our 0 to 62 time is also worse by, I would say, a decent margin. But that was one of the reasons why I brought back the transmission as far as the top speed, was trying to get that 0 to 62 time to be a little bit better, but also managing to keep the wheel spin down as well. Otherwise, not much changed. Everything else here is going to be the same. So I'm mostly just going through this for the graph. So if you want to check out the graphs and how it performs acceleration and steering behavior and everything. So brakes are going to be pretty much the same setup. And unfortunately, I think, okay. I think the game just froze on me, so I think I'm going to do an edit here, and we'll be... Oh, okay, good. The game froze for a second there, and I thought it had crashed, but we're okay, we're okay. So we're on the brake tab. Again, this is going to be exactly the same, but so you guys can check out the difference. Aerodynamics is going to be the same as well, as is the passenger setup. The quality setup, I guess, or interior. That's the word I was looking for, interior setup. Suspension is going to be pretty much the same. And we'll go over all the detailed stats in the test track as well. But the main thing I want to look at is that the market segment. And again, I am not getting it. It froze again. It's taking quite a long time to load in this part, and I'm getting a... All right, that took a long time, but I don't know what's going on. The game's acting up a little bit. But in any case, The numbers we end up with is a drivability of 52.1, which is a definite improvement. Sportiness drops down a bit, down to 9.8. Comfort is 26.7. I think that's a slight improvement. Prestige is at 11.3. I don't think that's much different. And safety is at 34.3. Total cost rise is up a little bit, as does production unit time. And we already kind of discussed some of these other things. I think the weight might be a little bit less. I'm going to flip onto this design tab. All right, okay, I was about to say, if this keeps freezing up every time I press a tab, I might try and reload the game here. So let's go to detailed stats. And again, I'm going to go over this, just give you a few seconds to look at everything. So we have drivability, sportiness, comfort, prestige, safety, and practicality. And just looking at this very briefly, most of the numbers are pretty much the same. I think footprint might be a little bit different, but I'm not noticing anything else. It looks like passenger space, cargo volume, width, doors, load capacity, and driver height is all the same. So if anything has changed, it's just footprint. Okay, now let's get to the market tab. And as we can see, it's meeting a lot of these market segments a lot better than the manual transmission version. The only thing that I think might be a difference is that affordability is also a big difference. And I might have to actually flip between the two to actually see how different it is. I would assume the manual transmission is a little bit cheaper, but I've said in the past that oftentimes automatic transmissions don't give you the results that you would expect out of an automatic transmission in real life. But in any case, we have family comes up to 80, so a lot better there. And we're meeting that better than we were family sport. But it looks really close to what the numbers were for our manual. So we're not really losing anything here. We're just mostly gaining more of a competitiveness in the family segment. Commuter is also much greater, which is interesting considering that our economy is actually worse than it was in the manual transmission version. So as we can see here, if you actually look at the commuter makeup, a big element of that is drivability, which is, I think, why we're getting more of a more competitiveness in this segment than we were before. Although economy is a big part of that, it wasn't the difference wasn't enough to make up for how much of a difference we were getting from the drivability and a couple other areas. I think comfort being another area. And we can see a similar dynamic with the family. So between the two, family is much more about drivability. So that's why it's our best performer. Now for the family sport, sportiness is a little bit more important and drivability not as much, but it's still a concern. And we're also doing better in the city economy and city markets as well. And again, drivability is a big part of that, which is why this has increased so much. Okay, so just to get a comparison here, I'd like to switch back over to the manual and see how we perform just in the market segment. So as I thought, we're more affordable than the automatic in most of these categories, but we lose out competitiveness-wise. So that's the difference between the two trims. Let's go ahead and close out, and we'll go ahead and compare as I normally do, although I think you got a pretty good comparison there. So between the two trims, the manual transmission has a pretty big difference in the drivability there, 5 points almost. But we also have a big difference in sportiness, which is a difference of 7 points in favor of the manual transmission car, which is why it performed as well as it did in the family sport category. As far as comfort, we lose out of 4 points, which I think is another reason why this performs so much better competitively, because we saw comfort was a big element of where we were getting that competitiveness makeup. We have prestige. It's a little bit more prestigious with the manual transmission version, but not a big difference. And safety is exactly the same, so not going to have a difference there. As far as I think this is practicality. It's the same, as well as is the off-road and I'm going to assume this is something to do with cargo. Or utility? Yeah, utility. That's probably utility. Looks like we have a little bit more utility with the automatic transmission version. And as far as reliability, we are more reliable with the manual transmission version. Economy, we already knew that this performed a little bit better. And weight, we're a little bit lighter with the manual transmission version. That's good to see. Although I think if it was the same number of gears in both gearboxes, you would see a difference there. Where, I mean, you wouldn't see the difference there. It'd probably be the same weights. Or even still, no, this has less gears, right? So, yeah, okay, finally they have automatic transmissions weighing the way that they probably should, being a little bit heavier, even though there's less gears. Emissions, we're doing a little bit better with manual transmission, it looks like. And production units a little bit less, as well as a little bit less in cost. Not a big difference in the cost, but just that slight bit. Okay, so with that all said, I think we're getting a much more of an idea now that we have that market, how competitiveness, the competitiveness in the different market segments, much more of an idea of how our car is performing, so that's good to see. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner signing out.